So, you're thinking about starting a pet shop, a farm, or maybe a grooming salon here in the Philippines. Well, before you jump in, you need to know there's an official government playbook you absolutely have to follow. Today, we're going to break down those exact regulations, piece by piece, so you have a super clear map for doing things right and making sure the animals are well cared for. Let's get into it.
I know, it sounds like the beginning of a really weird joke, right? But believe it or not, the answer is pretty serious. All of them, plus dozens of other businesses that work with animals, fall under the very same set of foundational rules designed to protect animal welfare across the Philippines.
So here's our game plan. We're going to walk through this whole framework together. We'll start with where these rules even come from, then dive into the requirements that practically everyone has to meet. After that, we'll look at some of the unique rules for specific places, map out the actual registration process, and finally, we'll talk about the money, the costs, and what happens if you get it wrong.
All right, first things first. Where do these regulations actually come from? Who's making the rules here?
This isn't just a bunch of random red tape somebody made up. The entire system is built on a really important law, Republic Act 8485, which most people know as the Animal Welfare Act of 1998. Think of the law as the why. Then the Department of Agriculture, through its Bureau of Animal Industry, comes in and provides the how, the specific, detailed rules to make sure that law is actually followed.
And you might be surprised by just how many businesses fall under this umbrella. It's not just the obvious ones like pet shops. We're talking about everything from your local vet and groomer to massive operations like hog farms, racetracks, and even zoos and circuses. The basic rule of thumb is, if your business involves housing animals, it's almost a guarantee you need to register.
Okay, so while a zoo and a pet shop are obviously very different, the government has created a set of universal requirements that apply to almost everyone. Let's think of this as your essential, non-negotiable checklist for getting started.
And, no surprise here, the journey always begins with a bit of paperwork. Let's take a look at exactly what you'll need to gather.
These are the absolute must-haves. You've got your standard business registrations from DTI or SEC, a mayor's permit, and a simple sketch of your facility's layout. But two really key ones are the environmental clearance certificate from the DNR and a notarized affidavit. That last one is basically you making a legally binding promise that you're going to follow all the animal welfare rules.
All right, once you've got your documents in a row, the regulations get very specific about the people, the human expertise you need on your team.
Now this is a big one. Every single facility must have a licensed Filipino veterinarian. And not just someone you can call, but someone on a formal, notarized employment contract. On top of that, both the owner and the vet have to attend an official seminar on animal welfare. This isn't just a box-ticking exercise. It's to make sure the people running the show truly understand their legal and ethical duties to the animals.
Okay, papers are in order, teams assembled. Now for what is maybe the most important part, the physical place where the animals will live.
The standards here are all about the health, safety, and well-being of the animals. You know, things that just make sense. Enough space to move around, good lighting and ventilation, and, of course, proper waste disposal. The place has to be secure. But I think this is brilliant. The law requires a dedicated quarantine area to separate new or sick animals. That's a really smart way to prevent disease from spreading.
So we've covered the basics that apply to everyone. But now let's get into the interesting part, how the rules change and get more specific depending on what kind of facility you're running.
For instance, the regulations draw a very clear line between a veterinary clinic and a veterinary hospital. A clinic is for diagnosis and treatment and can even be a mobile unit. A hospital, on the other hand, is held to a much higher standard. It needs to have more extensive facilities and is required to employ other professionals, like a medical technologist, which reflects a more advanced level of care.
And the rules for something like a circus are just fascinating. The law is explicit. Animals have to be tamed to perform, not forced in a way that causes them to suffer. It also demands safety measures for the public, like locked enclosures and warning signs. But this is the part that really stands out to me. Animals must have a private area where they can retreat from the public. That shows a real understanding that constant exposure is incredibly stressful for them.
Okay, so you have your paperwork, your people, and your place all figured out. What does the actual path to getting your hands on that official certificate look like?
Well, the good news is the process is very logical. First, you submit your application and all those documents we talked about. If everything's in order, the Bureau of Animal Industry schedules an on-site inspection. If you pass, they get the certificate ready for approval. From there, you just get an order of payment, you pay the fee, and then, congratulations, you receive your official certificate of registration.
All right, let's talk about the bottom line. How much is this all going to cost? And, more importantly, what happens if you don't follow the rules?
The fees are pretty straightforward, actually. Your first registration is good for 1 year, and then renewals cover you for 3 years. So for example, a grooming facility starts at just 300 pesos. A pet shop is 500. Of course, bigger establishments like a zoo have a higher starting fee at 1,000 pesos.
Now here's a number I want you to burn into your memory, 50%. Why? Because if you are late with your renewal, the government adds an annual surcharge of 50% of whatever you owe. That's a huge penalty, and it's designed to make sure everyone stays compliant and up to date.
And the consequences for breaking the rules can be really, really serious. Your registration can be suspended or even completely revoked for things like lying on your application, not fixing problems found during an inspection, or just failing to keep good records. And here's the kicker. If your registration gets revoked, you are banned from even reapplying for 3 full years. That's a potential business killer right there.
Look, understanding these regulations is absolutely essential for any business owner, but it also gives power to the rest of us as customers and just as citizens. When we know the standards these places are supposed to be held to, we can make better choices and speak up for better care. So the real question becomes, how can all of us use this knowledge to become better champions for the animals in our own communities?